condition. Now, at baseline, in addition to getting these treatment assignments, students set an academic goal, which they then 1 week later were asked to report on. And in this data, you can see that self-reported goal accomplishment was higher in the situation modification group than either of the two comparison groups. We replicated this with a large sample of college students. Again, those who were given information about how they could use situation modification to meet their academic goals did better in doing so than two comparisons. And importantly, we found what we hypothesized, which is partial mediation. Well, we would have loved full mediation, but mediation to some extent by self-reported temptation during that week. In other words, students who learned to turn off their cell phones, put away their laptops when they were trying to read a book, etc., felt fewer feelings of temptation towards those other objects, and that at least partially explained the effect of the intervention on goal accomplishment. Now, I should say a word about these latter three strategies, but I'll be more brief because James and I don't believe that they're as effective as these earlier upstream situational strategies. So first, there is selectively attending, looking at things in ways that you think will make it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong one. So for example, at the KIPP charter schools, and there are many of them in New York, but they're now all over the country, they have recognized from fairly early in their establishment, these schools, but probably 10 or 15 years ago, they recognized that, for sure it's hard to pay attention to your teacher. It's hard to just look at your teacher when you'd rather look elsewhere. But they also recognize that by looking at your teacher, and I'll give you an example. This is a KIPP classroom. They're all looking at the teacher. At KIPP, they call it tracking. It's tracking the teacher. That by accomplishing that, you then make it easier to do what's even harder, which is to truly, listen and encode and engage with the academic material. In other words, you can look out the window if you want to, and then it's going to be darn near impossible to pay attention at all or to process the history lesson. Or you can track the speaker, which they do at KIPP schools, and that facilitates, downstream regulation of the things that you need to do. So selectively attending, what does it look like when high school students explain they can, not look at their phone, ignore my phone, or they can direct their internal attention to things that are more useful in terms of regulation. Remind myself that even the most boring classes count towards my GPA. I will note that even though in Walter Michel's early studies of the marshmallow, students, I guess I should say 4-year-olds, they're not students yet, children who selectively look at objects that are not the marshmallow are able to wait longer. So selective attention, strategic attention emerged as one of the most important strategies in those early preschool studies. Notably, this was the least commonly nominated strategy among high school students that we surveyed, which we haven't quite figured out why, but we note the disparity. Now, what do you do once you've chosen where you're going to be, modified the situation or not, attended to what you've decided to attend to? You can, of course, change your mind. You can reframe or change the cognitive representation of the situation. There are many ways to do this, but one very important way relevant to self-control, self-regulation is reconstruing the distance of the situation, psychological distancing. So in one random assignment study in collaboration with Ethan Cross, kids at 5th grade were either chosen to replay an event of an angry memory as it unfolds in their own eyes, that's the first-person immersed egocentric control condition, or alternatively in the intervention, to replay the event as it unfolds as they observed their distant self, the third person, or most effectively, it's like you're in a YouTube video. Oh, okay, now I know what you mean. Okay, so this is very facilitative of emotion regulation, in particular regulating the lingering negative emotions of that angry memory, easier when you're seeing yourself in the third person, like you are a fly in the wall in the situation versus from the first person egocentric perspective. I recently had an argument with my spouse and tried to do this. I was like, oh, okay, Angela Duckworth had an argument with her spouse. It didn't really work, actually. I was, flooded with emotion, but I will say this. I think that in general, the very exciting work on psychological distancing and reconstrual, it opens up a whole doorway of things like just the very idea that the mental representation, that there's still some agency there, that